5 from Russia. We got ourselves a London system. My opponent is playing very quickly. But this is not considered the most accurate way of playing as white, because queen b6, especially then queen b3, c4, queen c2, bishop f5 is considered quite comfortable for black. And here now that b3 has been forced, that is forever going to be a slight weakness in white's position. And that means that although the white clearly has no particular problems, it means that I have some prospects long term. And I gotta say, as I've said before, I feel like my opponent is playing a bit too quickly here, especially this last move, rook ac1, because there are some things to consider here, especially bishop to a3. The obvious response would then be rook c2, but that would lose to either knight takes d4 or knight b4, both moves attacking the rook and basically trapping the rook and ensuring that my rook from c8 will take the rook on c2 later on. The question is whether I can gain anything from bishop a3, rook d1, and so on. Knight takes e5, d takes e5. My knight is attacked, so I don't win a pawn. Probably I don't gain a whole lot, but I will do it anyway. Bishop a3, a rook to d1, and I will probably go queen to a5. Continuing to hunt those pawns. Rook b1 is also natural. Kind of didn't consider that. Now with queen a5, I feel like b4 could be seriously inconvenient for me. Okay, let me try and reroute the pieces instead. Bishop a3, that was a clear case of long think, wrong think, because I ended up playing a subpar move there. Now I've at least opened up the attack on the c file. So although, and this trade I'm fairly happy with, just getting his knight away from e5. And generally trades here are pretty good for me, seeing as I will be doing well in an ending because of my superior pawn structure. He does have a little trick here, which is rook to b3, or I actually have a trick because rook b3 looks strong, right? If he'd played rook b3, a b4, c b4, I cannot take on b4 with a bishop because of a3, and that bishop cannot move because of the pin on my queen. But it turns out that I can put the bishop on c1 instead. Only square that it has, but it's a good square. And later on, I can potentially trade the bishop for his knight, and I will be having a better pawn structure there. Think again, he should have gone rook b3 here, because this trade is very good for me, seeing as I have the more compact pawn structure, and his pawn on d4 is going to be weak until the day it eventually falls, and his pawn on a2 may be weak as well. Yeah, I do have the option of going knight to h5, looking for some tricks like bishop e3, rook takes e3, followed by queen takes d2, or knight b3, rook takes b3, followed by knight takes f4. But after bishop g5, I don't see it. f6 runs into queen takes g6, so I cannot really do that. So I'll do rook to c8 instead. Often the most natural move is just the best. Now rook c1 may be a bit of a threat, so I expect him to move his knight either to f3 or to b3. Probably f3, and then I will almost certainly play knight e4. exploiting the fact that that square is no longer protected by one of his by his knight. I think maybe queen a6 is not stupid here. I could have gone queen a7, forced the trade. Then he goes rook takes c8, rook takes c8, knight f3, and my queen may not be doing all that much on a7. It feels like it's a bit more active on a6, and it also opens up the possibility of playing bishop to d6 later on. Once again, trading pieces should be good for me, seeing as I have the better pawn structure and therefore better prospects in the ending. Also, the one advantage of putting the queen on a6 is that I protect the c8 square, so now I can just kick his queen away. My opponent is playing well though. I think he's a little bit worse, but it's not a lot, and that's not a bad position to be in at this point. I may have a threat here, which I think he missed. Knight c3 and now knight e2 is a very strong threat. Picking up his bishop. If he moves the bishop, I will go knight to e2, and then I will play the bishop to d6 with check, and I will take on d4 with the knight, opening an attack up from the queen to a6, attacking f1, his rook there. And as far as I can see, rook c1 is maybe possible now. Sorry, rook e1. If knight e2, knight e2 he will take, and then take the bishop on a3. So that is probably the only way not to lose material immediately. I do think, however, after rook to e1, bishop to f8, I will win a pawn, because I'm threatening both knight to e2 and taking the pawn on a2. So first tangible result of the little pressure I've had here is the win of a pawn, and that is nothing to sneeze at, I believe. Yeah, we trade, and now I should eventually, probably not knight c3 because of rook c1. Now I should eventually be able to convert. Happy to play f6, taking control over both the squares his knight could possibly jump to, and yeah, later on I will probably knight d3 here, trying to reroute that knight. Bishop b4, trying to make at least pseudo active moves. At some point I have to speed up, but for the moment looks like he's doing worse on time than I am. Okay, he found a good sequence here. Rook a6. Yeah, that was a bit unfortunate. Now I just have to protect and start all over again. Okay, we'll go king f7. The bishop on b4 is protected. Next I will go rook e7. If he trades rooks, I'm happy with that, since his rook was the active one. And then I'll bring my king around, and I should eventually win this game. Okay, could trade, but also just working the king up seems fine. King c4. Now I think d4 is falling, and yeah, bishop c3 seems cleanest. Take on d4 next, and 2 pawns up is at least one too much. Yeah, wherever I can flag or can win on the board, it's a nice situation to be in. Okay, good game by my opponent, and I think also a very decent game from an instructional point of view, because it showed the value of the pawn structure, and that is eventually what decided this game. Okay, let's continue. We have a French player, fairly high rated. Don't know who this is. But yeah, it's a 3-minute game, so slightly less yapping this time. So he insists on allowing the Grunfeld. Well, if you insist, then I shall oblige. So this is, ooh, that is a mouse slip, and quite an unfortunate one. C5 obviously was the intention. Yeah, so here we have it, just a Grunfeld tempo down. Not ideal. Not ideal at all. What should I do? I'll try bishop g4. Knight c6 there. d5 was probably strong. Knight a5. Bishop moves. I can take on c3, but with that awful knight on a5, the French knight, as they like to call it now, I didn't like my prospects there. Now I'm thinking rook b7, cd4, cd4, knight c6. Hope for the best. Yeah, bishop d5 is probably a very strong move, which was not really spotted by the author of the black side in this particular game. Yeah, rook b7 seems obvious. Rook c8, or maybe queen c8. So pretty grim. I'll go queen c8. Make this a double unintentional pawn sack, because you can take on c6 and take on e7. But I'm hoping then I will have, some compensation. Ooh, this is no good. This is no good. That was a bit of a gift, I have to say. Queen takes e4. Yeah, rook e1 would have been the obvious response, but unfortunately for him, the rook on b1 was hanging. And this means that from being quite clearly worse, I'm now clearly better, because I have the bishop pair and the better pawn structure. So the only worry that I have now is that the position will become too drawish, and hopefully I'll manage to pull through. Yeah, exchanging queens there was not ideal, but looks like I'm still winning a pawn. Rook b1 is logical. Probably d5 was better though, because I think I would probably have taken on d5. He takes on a7. I go rook a2, and I eventually win a2. But probably the 4 against 3, even with bishops on the board, would not have been enough. This is very interesting, actually. Usually you have this sort of ending, 3 against 3 with an a pawn, but the f pawns are very rarely doubled. But I do think sometimes the double f pawns can be good for defensive purposes, like in a 4 against 3 situation. I think it's not bad, because it's very difficult to create a passed pawn against the double pawns. But in this situation, it's probably no good for him, because as I said, the double pawns mainly have defensive value, and in this particular case, he usually needs to create some counterplay on the king side. In this, yeah, as it's happened, he tried to create counterplay on the king side, but I managed to win both his f pawns, and with 2 pawns up, it's plain sailing, and he resigns before I win the last one. Okay, that was you know what? Maybe I could have trapped his rook if he'd taken the pawn on e7. I could have gone bishop f6. There was knight e5 though. Maybe take on f3 and then bishop f6. Although then d5, queen a6, rook b7, probably was doing great there. It was interesting though. He should have taken the pawn, because after what happened, he just had a considerably worse position. Okay. I'm gonna accept a 5-minute challenge now against Claude Masseron, apparently from the UK. Sounds very French. Okay, I will go for the what's it called? It's called the Anglo-Scandinavian, I think, because you're playing the Scandinavian against the English, and my opponent is apparently English. I'm playing the English, so what I can say about this opening is that it's not good, but not as quite as bad as it looks. Which is often the case, actually, for openings where you bring your queen out early. It looks ugly, but it may not be that bad. E3, I feel like, is just a little too soft. He's not trying to punish me at all for my provocative play. And this just means that, apart from my queen, which is strangely placed here, everything else kind of makes sense. And now that he's allowed my h-pawn to run up the board, as a modern chess player, I'm obviously going to be happy with that. So the current status is I am happy. And I think my position is pretty good. Now I have a choice, though. Both bishop g4 and h3 look very attractive. Bishop g4, there is queen b3. Knight f3 then, followed by castles. There may be some h3. It looks like I should have some tactics there. Okay, I'll follow my intuition and think later if I shall be required. I'm already seeing tactics like queen b3, knight f3, king to f1, long castles. By the way, after king f1, I do have h3, but I'm not sure it's great. Here I also have h3, and this time I do think it's very good, though. Those other lines were very, very, very interesting, though. But I guess we'll focus on what has actually happened. Fg4 looks forced. Yeah, bishop f1, unfortunately, isn't very good. I can go bishop takes f3 and win a rook, as far as I can see. But I have another option, which is a lot more attractive. And it's a lot more fun. So I'll take on c3. The point of this move is just to free the e4 square for my knight. Oh, nah, that's no good. You should have taken the queen. There was no bluff, like take the queen. What are you thinking about? Yeah, so bc3 was obviously the critical line. I would have taken an f3, and then if king f2, I would have knight to e4 check, which is really, really nasty. So you probably or king e2. I have at very least a discovered check like knight takes h2 and then take the queen. So I was winning my material back, which is not as good as winning a rook. But I had the chance to play a flashy move, and I thought, why not? Especially seeing as it retained a massive advantage for me. Now, however, he's just losing the queen with check, and mate is imminent as far as I can see. There should be a very quick mate here. Let me treat this as an exercise and try and find it. Okay, mate in 2. Probably there's no mate in 2. Knight f3. King e2. There's no mate in 2. No, knight d2 is mate. Knight d4 is mate. Yeah. But no, that I saw. But knight f3, king d1. Knight d4 is not mate, so there's no mate in 1. But knight f2, queen e1 is mate in 3. So okay, whatever. We'll go for the mate in 3. Don't see anything better. So I think for my opponent, and this is a very nice mate though. Which one is the best though? Knight g1 is also mate. The infamous double check. This is cruel, but which one do I like better? I think knight d4 is still nicer because there's a bit of an echo of Legal's mate. So I'll go for knight d4. Okay, the lesson here for my opponent is clearly that call my bluffs. When I play provocatively in the opening, try and punish me. I don't always know what I'm doing. I usually do, but not always. Okay, so let's go for another. Let's go for a 3-minute game. Trying to find a high-rated opponent. Okay, how about this one? King e3 from. Oh, really? Play the Scandinavian, and you are so rude as to just offer me that pawn? So this is a bit funny. That if my pawn was on c5, this would be a Budapest Gambit in reverse. What do I play against the Budapest Gambit? Okay, knight f6, bishop c4, e6. That's a little bit dull because he will probably regain the pawn with a slightly worse position. And where's the fun in that? Okay, I will try and play aggressively because why not? f5, knight g3. I don't know if fe4 was a big threat there. Maybe bishop c4, queen d4 probably. The point is, if fe4, queen h5 could be nasty. Anyway, gotta play. Speaking of nasty, maybe f4. Oh, there's knight h5. So, yeah, okay. I think the logical way here is once again to push them pawns. Clearly, I'm not going to be able to castle queen king side here very soon anyway. So there's no reason not to. Oh, not to e2. It really is as though my opponent is just trying to set out to surprise me here. Okay, I'll go queen d6. If knight c3, I would have had to go a6. So he should have included knight c3. Now I can just develop castle, and the knight on h1 is awful. I have a space advantage as well. The only problem is that I don't have a lot of time, but I think I should have enough to convert the considerable advantage that I have here. Knight b4 seems to win a pawn. Bishop f6, bishop f6, knight d5 cannot be prevented. And then I will be pawn up, better control in the center, and better minor piece, better major pieces as well. In short, life is good. Yeah, queen a4. It's quite logical. I guess bishop c5 developing while protecting something. The pawn on a7. He's got b4, bishop b6, c4, but then I go rook d4, and if c5, I bishop takes c5 because of the pin on his queen. So he can't actually do anything too aggressive here. Yeah, I guess I'll just take on d1 and f4. Creating a possible threat of f3, also rook g8 can be played later on. Queen e4 is a good move. I guess I'll just go f5 though. Yeah, and now I can just trade because... Oh! I thought there was a back rank mate, but he could have taken on c5, and he had a square on h2. That was insane. No, that was... I don't know what that was. That was really bad. This is instructive though. His knight has no squares. No, that was incredible. So I have 30 seconds to convert, or 29 now. Should be plenty. We'll just walk the king over. This king has no squares. Bishop d4 maybe coming as well. And yeah, king h5 is a good pre-move, because the only way he could try to trick me was knight g3, and king h5 would not be legal in that case. You know, I'm explaining it to you not only about the chess, but also about pre-move trickery and so on. Okay, he resigns, and that seems justified. Okay, decent game, except from one really bad hiccup there. Okay, let's go ahead with another 3-minute game against Ladi from Austria. Okay, no more Anglo-Scandinavian. We'll go for a Symmetrical English instead, of all things. Yeah, lots of decent setups here. Which one should I choose? Okay, let's go for the modern line. Bishop f5. The idea here is you want to provoke e4, then you go bishop g4, and you're pretty happy with the weakness that has been created on d4. And otherwise, you go for bishop queen d7 and bishop h3, trying to leave yourself with a fianchetto bishop against a non-fianchetto bishop. Maybe d5 or bishop takes a3, h3 followed by d5 was interesting for him there. Knight d5 seems a bit soft. I don't really know what the plan was there. Going h5, intending to go h4 possibly, but also I just think h5, h4 could be a good inclusion for me. Now I don't know exactly why. It was just that My intuition told me that. Why intuition? Why did you tell me that? The intuition doesn't know. Okay, we'll develop normally. D5, I think now is logical. I may go knight a5 then, followed by b5, also knight e5. Either way, I'm doing fine, but probably not more than that. If given the chance here, I may take on d4 and then go d5. Or actually after p3, now I can go d5 immediately. Because of the pin on his rook, there was no reason to shy away from that. Knight e5 is an option here for him now, but I think I'll take an e5, then go rook fd8. Not really worried about the lack of a fianchetto bishop there. Oh, I should be a bit careful. Rook d1, 8 would be a positional blunder now because of because of his possibility of going for d5 immediately. Now I'm not so worried about d5 though, because I have bishop takes b2 followed by knight a5. Rook c1 is a good move. Once again, preparing d5. In general, my opponent is playing very well here, and very solidly. So it's not going to be easy to win this. Okay, I'll go. Which one? Okay, I'll go b6 just to prepare knight a5 and yeah, to give it a stable square there. Once again, I think he should have gone d5 there, forcing me to trade on d2, followed by knight a5, because then he can jump with the knight to e5 as well. I think in that case he would have been doing fairly well, but now I think I'm the one who is somewhat better. And queen a4 is really, really annoying to meet because I'm attacking both a2 and c4. And in case he goes c5, which is the most logical move in my opinion, then I'll take on a2, and my queen will find a very nice home on d5 later on, consolidating everything. So I think my opponent is basically losing a pawn here, and this is probably even worse though, because the thing about when you're playing with so-called hanging pawns, which is usually pawns on the D and C file. Nice little tactic here, by the way. Knight e3 coming up with a fork, and then rook takes c2. The thing about these hanging pawns is that they're very strong together because they control a lot of squares. But once you lose one of them, all of the squares around that pawn become very weak. So it very often happens that when you lose one of the so-called hanging pawns, you're going to lose both. And that is why sometimes it's good to have hanging pawns rather than an isolated pawn, because you control more squares, and that is often a choice you get between hanging pawns and an isolated pawn. But also it means that with an isolated pawn, you only have one pawn to lose in the center, and often that can be you can gain some squares from losing that pawn. But when you lose one of the hanging pawns, often your opponent is the one who gains a lot of squares. So it's always an interesting discussion there. Yeah, 25-55, no nationality or name. Interesting to see. Gonna go for an old favorite of mine here, the Benko Gambit, which I think has kind of faded away a little bit. It's not as popular as it was, and the way people usually play it is without taking on a6 there. and allowing a4 and then going queen a5 later on, followed by bishop takes a6. I think both ways of playing are okay, but when playing this opening, you got to be aware that white is usually going to be better. It's just a question of whether you can sort of complicate the game and get a playable position. Rook b1. This is the old main line for white, and I have to say my opponent is playing it quite correctly. Playing rook b1 and bishop d2 is the correct move order there, and it usually leads to some white advantage. Yeah, so here I can go knight g4, which is typical, and knight e8, but knight a4 may happen then. It's been a long time since I played these lines, so I don't really know what to do. I think I played this move queen a3 though before, and sort of yeah, obviously I'm not going to repeat moves. That's one of the points that white sometimes has to make some kind of concessions in order to get out of that repetition. Yeah, we'll go knight c7. For the moment, I'm not worried about the pin to my queen. Now I'm a little bit more worried because of knight b5. Not that worried though. The question here though is, how am I creating counterplay? And it's not obvious. Where is my counterplay in my mind? Okay, no, probably we won't. Okay, let's bite in the sour grass, as we say in Norwegian, and move the queen away. Probably queen a7 could happen next. I probably gotta play c4 at some point. The good thing about my position though is, while I am a pawn down and there's no very obvious compensation for it, my structure is very solid. Like, the only weak point in my structure is potentially the pawn on e7, while d5 could be a little bit weak for white, b3 could be a little bit weak, and if you move the pawn to e4, which is very logical, protecting the pawn on d5, then there could be some fairly weak squares behind it, especially d3, and the pawn on e4 could come under attack as well. So that is one of the points of playing this opening, that you do get some long-term structural compensation for the pawn you're down. So you shouldn't really panic if you cannot find immediate compensation. And most of all, you should not listen to the computer, because the computer will always tell you that white has a huge advantage, which could very well be true. But it also it's a little bit demoralizing, I think, when you're trying to play this opening. Bishop g5 is a bit surprising, because I can now win a pawn with bishop takes c3, followed by bishop takes e2. Question is, do I want it? Then rook e1, knight takes d5, queen d2. My knight look a little bit exposed. Probably I don't want to do that. It's also a common theme here, whether actually taking on e7 is a threat. I believe it may not be. Bishop e7, I got rook e8, a5 deflecting the queen, I got queen takes a5, and the knight on c3 is hanging. if this bishop moves away to h4, then g5 would trap the bishop. So in the end, he decides that there's nothing in particular to be gained there. Okay, let me go queen b4. I assume bishop d2 is going to happen. Then I may go c4. It looks risky, but I may get away with it. If bc4, queen c4, let's just think about this for a sec. If bc4, queen c4, rook b7, bishop b7, I think I'm happy. Knight c5 is coming next. Don't think he can trap my queen with the e4 and bishop bf1 because I have queen b3 there later on. Knight b5 is interesting. Then cb3, rook b3, queen a4 seem to be doing well. Okay, I don't have time for this, obviously. And if knight b5, cb3, queen c7, I got queen a4. Knight c3 back, I take on c7, and then I take on e2. Some very complicated lines here. Queen c6 as well. Didn't think this was dangerous. Queen a4, knight c7 might be very good for white, but I don't immediately see what's wrong with queen c5 here. Now I see what's wrong. Now I do see what's wrong. There's rook c1, and I was thinking bishop takes b5, and I'm completely fine. But the rook on the rook on the square called b7 will be hanging then. So that could mean that I'm in a world of trouble then after rook c1. Okay, so I think this means that I have to turn to plan B, which is to try and hustle him in one way or another, meaning either to flag him or to somehow trick him. And a Church of Rio, that's the name. Took some time for me to... Oh, that is so tricky. That is so nasty what he did here. Yeah, it's really nasty. Because you can take on b7 now. Okay, I still have hope though. It's not dead lost at all. Rook takes b3, I take on e2. I should have excellent drawing chances. Knight f3 though. Yeah, I'm not going to accept a draw. Come on. Have you seen me play before? I don't accept draws in worse positions. Either I'm going to get flagged or I'm going to flag you. Okay, let's just exchange those. Make some quick moves. And then it's going to be a flagorama. Flagorama. Sorry, dude. Those